Rahim Grant was an aspiring rapper from Atlanta, known for speaking out against violence in the rap industry. However, despite his desire to focus strictly on music, he would tell his mother, Geraldine, that he feared he wouldn't make it to 30. This would end up being an unfortunate prediction, as on December 29, 2017, Grant would be found dead in his apartment at only 28 years old with 7 bullet wounds. No arrest would be made for the murder of Grant for almost 2 months until police discovered 4 videos on Grant's phone and realized he had filmed his own murder. Rahim Grant, known under the stage name Red Beezy, always had an affinity for music, picking up the drums at only 3 years old and performing on the TV show Showtime at the Apollo at 7. His mother, Geraldine Grant Bryson, acting as his manager. By all accounts, a rising star I'm sure many believed would have had a long and successful career. However, Grant would never have what I'm sure many of us would consider to be a big break, but he would become a recognizable name in the rap industry around Atlanta when he became an established producer and recording engineer by the time he was in his 20s, making the beats for other rappers, big and small, all while he continued to produce his own music and perform shows when possible. This would lead him to meet a fan named Sierra Harp in 2013 at one of his shows. She had worked promoting local bars and clubs in the area, and after one of his shows at a club she was promoting, asked Grant for an autograph and asked him for a job. A bold move, but one that would pay off, as Harp would begin promoting Grant's shows. Clearly, however, there was something else between the two beyond a professional relationship, because shortly after, Harp would become pregnant with Grant's child. Although the two would never officially be a couple, they would decide to have the child, a little girl they would name Angel, born in November of 2014. The two would decide to co-parent her together. Those who knew him have said that Grant was a terrific father and spent as much time as possible with Angel, something he himself was never privy to growing up. Geraldine is quoted as saying, "He loved his daughter, and when he got his daughter, he became the greatest dad. His whole world changed." Despite having no official custody of Angel and not even being listed on her birth certificate, Grant would allow the two, Angel and Harp, to move in with him so he could have an easier time caring for his daughter. So I'm sure it came as a surprise to many when Harp revealed that Grant, the outspoken rap pacifist and loving father, was actually extremely abusive. According to Harp, Grant would often drink and take drugs recreationally, such as Xanax, and when combined, would often lash out in anger, at first verbally, and then physically. She knew the signs of abuse, having grown up in a rough situation in which she was often faced with physical, mental, and emotional abuse, and in her words, she knew to be on her guard when Grant was in one of those moods. But on December 29th, Grant would allegedly be in one of these angry and manic states when Harp would run out of the apartment with Angel in one hand and a firearm in the other. Injuries and cuts all over her legs. She would frantically bang on a door belonging to a neighbor before being let in and calling the cops just a little after 11 p.m. When they arrived, she would tell police everything and began describing how Grant had begun to get physical with her and grabbed a knife before inflicting several wounds to her legs. Fearing for her life, she grabbed the weapon and fired 3 times, picked up her daughter from her room, and left. And when police entered his apartment, they would find Grant dead. Again, this would be a revelation that many who knew Grant couldn't believe. Many couldn't believe Harp needed to resort to deadly force, as she feared for her own life, but perhaps none more than Geraldine, Grant's mother. Because while some couldn't believe Grant was secretly this violent, abusive person, Geraldine thought something seemed fishy and immediately began attempting to poke holes in Harp's story. The first hole being that she believed that Grant was not a violent man and suggested he rarely got angry and when he did was the type to just walk away. So hearing Harp's claims of abuse immediately came as suspicious to her, even resulting in Geraldine coming out and suggesting Harp was lying and that the wounds on Harp's legs may have been self-inflicted, which was interestingly what Harp had claimed when it was discovered during his autopsy that Grant also had similar wounds. That's right, Grant, despite being the one who supposedly came at Harp with a weapon, also had wounds from said weapon, the origin of which Harp did not have an answer for, eventually suggesting that he may have done it himself. There is also the fact that although she had initially claimed that she had fired her weapon 3 times, when the autopsy had revealed 7 bullet wounds. Again, Harp did not really have an answer for this inconsistency in her recollection, even going as far as suggesting that she had blacked out during the ordeal and only remembered Grant becoming physical and then leaving the apartment. As always, I'm not a lawyer, but inconsistencies or not, the case would go into almost a weird limbo state for several months. But despite Harp not being charged with the crime, the police remained suspicious as more and more inconsistencies piled up, like the fact Grant was discovered face down and appeared to have several wounds originating from behind. However, one day, while interviewing Geraldine, she would mention how the relationship between Grant and Harp was not official, and that they were allowed to date other people, which sometimes created friction between the two who were living together, and as a result, she would offer her some advice. Anytime things get crazy, anytime you feel like you're in danger, film it, record yourself as proof. That is when police remembered they had Grant's phone in their possession, discovered next to him at the scene, and currently in storage due to the fact that they couldn't unlock it. So they began asking around, and to their surprise, Harp would willingly give them the password, allowing them to access Grant's phone. It was a long shot, frankly just another I to dot in the paperwork. However, when they opened the camera roll, they would find 4 videos taken the night of the murder, which would solve everything. The first video picks up with Grant in the bathroom, blood dripping from his head, as he says something along the lines of, "Y'all see this? This is what this did to me. Look at this knife. Y'all see this that Sierra Harp did to me?" The investigators couldn't believe it. Here, Grant was, documenting injuries he had, allegedly originating from Harp. But that was when they heard gunshots, one loud one, yelling from Harp, and then another, resulting in Grant falling to the floor and dropping his phone on the ground. Grant began grunting in pain as Harp can clearly be seen standing over him, her legs free of injuries. He would say something along the lines of, "I'm going to die," to which Harp would reply, "Yes, you are." She would see the phone and realize it was recording and stop it. But interestingly and unexpectedly, the next video would begin shortly after, now recorded by Harp. Still, no injuries on her legs, but now with blood on her face. Grant would beg for some water and warn Harp that she was going to go to jail. But Harp would just scream at him, saying, "I don't care if I go to jail for the rest of my life. I love you and you did me wrong," before firing the weapon several more times. Somehow, Grant was still alive, and he would begin to beg Harp, not for his life, likely knowing he was not going to make it out of this ordeal alive, but to see Angel, his daughter, and to be allowed to hold her one more time. Harp would say, "Crawl to her, mother," and fire the weapon again. At this point, Grant can no longer be heard and remained on the ground, face down, motionless and silent. Just off camera, a voice can be heard, the voice of Angel, their 3-year-old daughter, who had just witnessed everything, saying, "Daddy, Daddy." Harp would fire the weapon 3 more times, grab Angel, and run to the neighbor's apartment. On February 22nd, 2018, Clayton County officers would arrest Harp and charge her with the murder of Rahim Grant. However, when she had her day in court, things would only get crazier, as the jury gave little thought to her claims of self-defense. As the videos were played live, her team did their best, but no one is that good. And although she thought she could outsmart the world, likely giving the police the password to Grant's phone, knowing the footage would be found, and whatever it captured would be enough to paint the image of self-defense, she would be found guilty on all counts. It is reported that Harp never seemed remorseful or shed a tear during her testimony. Then, Harp's mother took the stand to describe how Harp's actions had affected the family, and to beg the judge for a light sentence. Or at least, that is what usually happens. But instead, Harp's mother, yes, her own mother, not Geraldine, instead asked the court to sterilize Harp so that she could never have another child, and to give her a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The entire time, Harp would mouth curse words to her mother. Although I can't attest to the type of relationship Harp had with her own mother, the fact that she would later raise Angel leads me to believe that she cared deeply for the family, and perhaps maybe even deeply for Grant. In the end, Harp would be sentenced to 125 years in state prison, the maximum sentence possible on every count. And at 29 years old, she will never be free. Although she had lost both her father and her mother, Angel is currently being raised by her grandmother, again Harp's mother, after being taken in by Child Protective Services over the course of the investigation. Those involved in the case have stated that although Grant had basically solved his own murder, it is hard to feel as though justice can ever truly be served in a case like this. Well, that's about it. Subscribe, and if you're claustrophobic, I think you'll hate this video about a young father who became trapped in a cave and is still there today. I'll see you next time.